try to figure out how we can resolve that. So it's a good point that we are certainly progressing.
Okay. Matt?
So there's about equal square footage that's vacant on Main Street. Why not consider moving the bookstore there, skip this idea of a linkage, and have students directly go downtown?
Well, I can't answer for Wesleyan other than when we had the empty Peltons, we asked, and at that point Wesleyan was not interested in moving the bookstore to Peltons. I'm certain that if that was a desire by Wesleyan to do that, maybe it would be us, maybe it wouldn't, but that's certainly something for the school to consider.
But if Wesleyan's not part of the equation, there's still equal square footage vacant on Main Street for you to move forward with this project.
I don't know what's exactly vacant on Main Street other than what's visible. There's challenges with Main Street development. We've done 2 projects on Main Street to date. Both projects have adequate off-site parking. To the gentleman, I'm sorry I don't know your name, the gentleman's point earlier, we built our building on the street line on the corner of Main Street and Union Street, thank you, thanks Jackie. And we put our parking behind the building with 110 off-street spaces. And then when we developed the Peltons building, we did the same. We kept the building where it was and worked around it. So anyone that would want to have an active retail operation would be concerned about off-street parking. And to the extent that Main Street buildings can be re-tenanted, it's always a preference. My suggestion to you is that there's been ample vacant Main Street storefront parking, and bookstores have been tried to be pursued in the past and have not been successful. But you know, that's just my view. Man, in the hallway? Yeah. I'm trying to go around the room. I'm sorry. I'll try to sweep. Yeah.
So as a student here, this semester cannot buy a single book from the bookstore. Most of my books are online, are PDFs that I get for free. We are in a time right now where we're moving away from the bookstore, moving away from this idea, as sad as it is for a lot of us, away from this idea of buying your books at a bookstore. So basing this whole project around the assumption that students, it's not a big campus, and the fact that like students are going to go and buy books at your bookstore, I think is a little problematic.
It's another good point. I'm 52 and I use an iPad, and he's 27 or 28 and likes to read books. So we joke about that all the time. I think there is a changing evolution of what is a bookstore, and whether you look at a Barnes & Noble or some of the nationals or J. Julia in Madison, which is some of the better independents, they all kind of accomplish the same thing. They become an experience as much as a place to purchase books, but a place to enjoy time. So I think part of it is that. I certainly think book sales are on the decline. I certainly think that that's part of the retailer's challenge to make any bookstore work. We talked to 2 national operators, and both are excited about the prospect long term. Won't be ours to operate, it will be ours to collect rent, but they have both indicated a willingness to move forward if this does happen.
Just to add to that point, this is certainly, it's a great question. We asked the same question, and we're trying to get our arms around it before making such a huge decision and investment in a project. But one of the things that is kind of, it makes us more optimistic is kind of the changing retail environment, changing retail kind of definition of what a bookstore serves. And we've had informal conversations with members of the Wesleyan community, and one of the gaps that seems to be prevalent and existing is that there's nowhere for a Wesleyan student to go buy bedding, to go buy a pillow, to go buy a rack, so that you can kind of put that into your dorm and otherwise fill out your space if you don't have a car. And so the hope is that this bookstore will serve as, you know, obviously books. It will also provide electronic devices, that's, you know, the Nooks or the Kindles or what have you, the iPads hopefully, but certainly also those home good elements, so that students could, as pedestrians, have access to those things and not have to drive to wherever to go to Target.
If you look at the Barnes & Noble Yale University bookstore on Broadway, I was involved in the redevelopment of Broadway, seems like a long time ago, but about 15 years ago, and that bookstore is much more than a bookstore. In a lesser environment, that would be kind of an analogous facility to what we would propose. You know, lesser meaning smaller. Ma'am, try to say.
I have confidence in you, Bob. You can. I work for Midnight on Main, and I think the investment in that and other things that you've done.
And you stand up?
I live on Pearl Street, and I can see. I'll be able to see the development from my porch. But I do want to. What I really have a hard time is when you say it's not a vibrant residential neighborhood. I moved in there 11 years ago, and I've never felt more connected to a group of people that extend from all the way to the end of Pelton's down through the far corners of the north end. We have a group of people that do potlucks every week, that have football parties at their houses, and our kids, the woman in the back and her husband walk 6 kids to McDonough, which has been grown as a community school, neighborhood school. They walk across Washington, and we have this connection. And when you talk about linkages, I don't know of any urban areas that are great urban areas without people that are really invested and that live there. And I know that you have the problems with the residents that are there. I know people haven't sold their houses, or that the other places cost a lot of money to rehab. But I have faith that you can figure that out. The rent might not be as high, and I get that challenge. But I really don't buy the link that this building is going to bring Wesleyan closer to downtown. I don't buy it.
I didn't mean to imply that Pearl Street. I think Pearl Street's a great residential environment.
They're all
I think
connected.
the Washington Street corridor, not so much. So where I might disagree with you is you live on Pearl Street, you cross Washington Street.
I went to the house that you have in contract for a get-together with many people in this room
Right.
4 months ago. And the other people in the other buildings taught our kids ukulele. I mean, I just have to tell you, it's all connected. We're all linked.
And I agree with that, except I would suggest to you that those buildings are in disrepair. The person whose house you went to desperately wants to sell his house, and re-tenanting those either as rentals or as homeowners to families on that corridor, I think is probably not going to happen very easily. And I think over time, those properties which are underinvested to Eve's point will likely become blighted. So from my standpoint, your neighborhood is phenomenal.
But nothing that makes Middletown great has been easy. Nothing that makes Middletown great has been easy.
Yeah, there's just another kind of small point here, and there's a traffic issue on the site. I mean, that's obvious, right? We don't have to debate that. The question is how to resolve it. But importantly, whether it's this project, which is mixed use, whether it's office and retail, the alternative is for it to be residential. And the question that I have trouble with is saying that residential is an appropriate land use for an adjacency to Washington Street, given the same traffic issues that we're kind of bringing forward.
I agree. Yeah.
I don't have anything too original to say. I want to just jump back to a couple points that were already made and add some clarifications. I've lived in lots of different urban areas. I've lived in New York, I've lived in Boston, I've lived in New Haven, I've lived in Portland, Oregon, and there are different kinds of busyness. Not all traffic means you're vibrant. It can mean, for instance, as we have on 66 right now, we have a lot of people going down Route 66 to get onto Route 9. It's not necessarily a sign that we're in some moment of fantastic synergy. So I'm glad that you've acknowledged that we have a traffic problem, because we do.
That's a good point.
It's not just everyone's out grabbing lattes. The other, couple other problems, I think. One is that this synergy you described, you brought up Kid City and Amato's, but there you don't have businesses, a business that will take away from businesses on Main Street. It's a fundamental difference. Finally, I would go back to the problem of vacant properties, whether it's further up Route 66 or down on Main Street. I think the property you developed with Mondo and your office buildings is very nice, but there is this sense of businesses playing musical chairs. And new things get built and things shuffle around, and we end up with this ever-accreting store of vacant retail space. So I am fundamentally disturbed by the idea that that this is the right solution. I don't think it will draw students down to Main Street any better. I think it's a potentially, honestly, I think it's a potentially tacky gateway to downtown. And I have no problem with Starbucks, Chipotle, any of the names we've been hearing around. They're perfectly good businesses, but I don't think that's the right site for them.
Fair enough. Sir?
Are tax credits or abatements involved in your economic plan for this at all?
No.
Good question.
Yeah, no, we don't, we built our
You don't
building in
foresee that.
one of the few urban developers, no tax abatements at the location we're at, and don't intend to ask for any here. Compare full share. Sir?
Have you given any consideration to the Hamlin Street property, which now the old physical plant of Wesleyan University?
You know, that's not for us to decide, that's the school to decide. I think Nate indicated at the outset of this discussion that there have been no decisions about the fate of it. I think it probably will depend on whether we move forward. If we don't, it's a moot issue. If we do, then that's a second discussion.
He's
I don't know.
referring to a vacant building that our physical plant shops used to be located in at
I'm sorry.
56 Hamlin Street.
I'm sorry about that.
Yeah, that is still vacant and it's not for sale. It's a much smaller piece of property and would not probably accommodate this
Apologies.
development.
Yeah. Ma'am?
I understand how the Wesleyan bookstore is good for the project, but I don't see why the project is good for Wesleyan University.
Honestly, we thought was.
My
I'm sorry. I
concern
thought you were done.
is still the traffic. I think there's a huge difference between the young people who are like walk to school by their parents